Hey guys, Cody here with a couple codes. So I'm going to start doing a daily vlog to keep track of my personal progress within the Odin Project. I'm going to do this in addition to the weekly updates that Emily and I are doing with each other to discuss our learnings, what we've been building, and our progress on a weekly basis. So if you're interested on seeing the nitty-gritty details of what I've been up to and how long it takes me to do specific sections, then definitely follow along with this playlist. It'll be Cody Completes the Odin Project or something like that playlist in the Couple Codes channel. For those of you who are new and do not know what a Couple Codes is, so my wife and I are completing the Odin Project together to become full stack web developers. And we're doing it full time. So we're doing it on 40-hour a week basis, trying to do it 8-hour days, 5 days a week, of working through the Odin project with the ultimate goal of becoming full stack software developers or just web developers, whatever comes first really. So we're sharing our journey, and as I mentioned, those are weekly updates. I'm going to be doing these vlogs for you guys as well. So with these vlogs, main thing I want to show you guys is how much time it's taking me, what my day-to-day is really looking at from a time perspective, and then I'll also just briefly go into what I worked on today and what I accomplished. And okay, so we're going to look at my CSV file that I'm using just to keep track of my time. This is a little bit messy. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. It's a pretty big file, but I will try to make some more pretty graphs later on when I have time. But we're going to start here. So every day, part of my routine is to actually just do touch typing in the morning. So I'm doing typing practice with Keyboard.com. This was something that was suggested early on in the Odin project, and I've stuck with it every single day that I'm doing the Odin project. Usually do 5 minutes a day, so it's not that much, but it is enough that I've seen pretty good progress over the course of time. So I'll actually share that with you guys real quick. So if I go to Keyboard.com, it's a nice program. It keeps track of your performance for each key and lets you know of what keys you need to work on. And essentially all you do with it is you are just typing these words here. Some of them are actual words, some of them are nonsense words. They are all random though, which is pretty nice because it forces you to focus on the typing and not necessarily on grammar and that kind of stuff and whether sentences make sense. But yeah, I've been doing this every day pretty much since the beginning of the Odin project within practice mode, but it does have really cool analytics. So you can see here I've done 5 hours 41 minutes total. Total of 726 lessons, which is just the sessions essentially. Although that's probably the blocks within a session, so you do multiple within a 5-minute period. And yeah, I did some today. And then you can see relative typing speed compared to other users. So I was actually more within this kind of distribution, this kind of big peak over here. I was more over here before, and now I've got a higher range because I've been doing it fairly frequently. But yeah, there's quite a bit of analytics here. See that typing speed goes up over time. Number of keys is starting to actually flatten within a lesson. You can also see your typing accuracy. But yeah, I like doing this just because it's a nice just way to warm up and get into kind of a focus kind of state before getting into the projects, and it has actually helped with my typing speed, which isn't that big of a deal since it's more about the problem solving for the software engineering and the web development part of it, but it has been something I've been working on. So let's go back here. So yeah, 5 minutes of the typing, and then I jumped into the JavaScript course again within the JavaScript full stack JavaScript pathway. Today I didn't get a full 8 hours in. We were coming off of a long weekend, hanging out with family. Had some family come into town, so Got a little bit late start today with the Odin project, but got in at least a solid 3 hours. And it started off with right here, just going back to the last lesson that I did and doing the knowledge check. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Odin project, at the end of each lesson is a knowledge check, and it usually asks you the main questions or the questions for the main topics that you should have learned within that section, and suggesting to review the material if you don't know the answers to the questions. So it was just 3 today, so it didn't take that long. And I actually record it in this large kind of CSV as well, so that if I ever get to it one day, I'll do some review of those questions if I need to when it comes to closer to actually doing job interviews. But at this point, I'm just focusing on applying the lessons and getting through the lessons. So for the rest of the day, I did the first project for the React section, and that was the CV application project. So spent a couple hours doing that today. It started off with doing layout on a piece of paper just to get an understanding of how I want to structure my HTML. Before I touch on that and get into this, the CV application project is, for this project, the main goal is to actually start using React to build your web pages and to build your JavaScript and your HTML. It's really just taking a curriculum vitae or CV or a resume or whatever you want to call it, taking the normal content that you would put into an application like that, in a document like a CV or a resume, making inputs out of them and essentially making an editable HTML resume, and only doing it with React. So not doing it with just vanilla JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, but mainly just focusing on React for the JavaScript portion of it. So using React to create the boilerplate kind of React JavaScript, and then specifically here it says that you should be using class components. So this is a project that's focused on a specific type of component within React, as opposed to using functional components. It wants you to focus on class components, since that is something that you will most likely see if you're using React within a job. So it's restricting us on using class components. And then it just briefly describes the structure for what the resume essentially should look like, having a general information section. So I'd say it's like a contact information, name, email, phone number, and then having an educational experience section for your school name, the title of your degree or whatever you studied, and the date of your study, and then a section for the actual experience from a work standpoint that you have. So company name, role, the tasks of your job responsibilities, and the date that you started and the date that you ended for that specific role. So pretty standard stuff from a resume standpoint. You kind of make a decision of how you want to set up buttons for editing the resume and submitting the resume to formulate a final HTML document of HTML elements for the actual resume. And as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be using components, and you also need to figure out how to use CSS within React as well for the project. So with that being said, come back to how I started off. So I started off by just drawing out what I wanted to do. So it's mainly this upper half right here, creating just a layout of containers within containers and what those containers were for how I wanted to structure that. And I was just using an old resume of my own for the overall layout for that. But I really wanted to get an understanding of what my HTML structure should actually start looking like. And we'll take a look at this. So I did go into HTML and just start making it a static version of the site, of the of the web page. And this is what that looks like. So it looks like pretty much like a standard resume. It's got the contact information section up here, a summary section, and a statement summarizing your skills and abilities. It has an education section for listing educational credentials, and then it has an experience section down here, and then finally this print button. You'll notice the first two sections up here are pretty straightforward. They're not really dynamic beyond just the singular inputs that are there. But for the next two sections, I want to make capabilities to add n numbers of education and n numbers of experiences for those two sections. So right now I just have these pseudo buttons here. One to add another education experience. So let's say I had a 3rd degree or something like that. I could add another one here, or if I had like a certificate or even the Odin Project or something, I could add that here by clicking this button, and it would generate another one. And then I also have these remove educations to be able to remove the specific educations and show which ones you're actually removing. So that's something I want to build out. So I'm going to have to create click events, or within React, I'm going to have to create functions for dealing with these click events within this form. And same thing down here. It's very similar. The only difference is that there's responsibilities. So I need to add responsibilities to a specific role and not just the overall section of adding another experience. I also would like to add some delete buttons for the responsibility as well. I'll probably go over in this section or this area at the end of a line, but I didn't visualize that just yet. So I'll have to do that then. But then this print button will then essentially get rid of all these buttons in here. So then it's just a straight up resume that looks very professional and good enough to send in for an application. And then you can save it as a PDF for actually utilizing it. So my intention is also to make these elements editable. So I'm going to have them be HTML elements, but upon clicking, ideally I'd like to have it so that you can click one of these and then you can edit it right where it's at, so you can still get a feeling for the layout of what's it going to look like, but you don't necessarily have it in like a strict form kind of structure. So that's where I got with that. This was just working in HTML, just working with CSS and HTML, just to understand what's my layout and my style. I did get into React a little bit, and this is what that looks like. So not much going on here. Didn't get that far with it, but the React is building out the HTML with JavaScript. So let's go over to the Visual Studio Code to see what I was working on. So this is the HTML that I was talking about, that I was just using just to get a sense of the layout and to start playing with the styling. So within the body we have a form, and that form has a header. That'll be the contact information. And here's the summary section, education, and then the experience section. So it's just the HTML of what we saw earlier. More interesting is getting into the React, and with this, using the index of the Create React app to put the CV onto the DOM. And this CV class is defined here. Within that, I have section classes being added with section name properties, and those section components can be seen here. The main thing about the section component and the section class is that there's an if-else statement here, so there's some logic. If it's the header, then it'll just build the header. If it's not, then it will build a div that has a H3 element with the class of title, and a div with the class of content underneath that. And that's, if we go back to the HTML over here, we'll see that starting with the summary div, summary section, that is true, we'll have a class title and a class content within that. So the education also has that, and the experience also has that. So that's where I got so far. Noticing some things that are wrong here. This should be class name within JSX. But this is where I netted out for today. And if we go back to the browser, this is the result. So we can see that the CV is appending, or is being added to the DOM. And we have the contact information, which is that first if statement in that condition within the section class. And then we have the 3 other sections: summary, education, and experience. And so ultimately we want to get to this, but we're here and still got a ways to go. But yeah, that took me about 3 hours to get through the layout and CSS styling here, but this is where we're at so far for today. But yeah, that's all I got for today, guys. So I'll be back tomorrow with another video on the vlog. If you guys have any content suggestions, please let us know. If there's anything you'd like to see, if you have any questions about anything I went over today, please let me know. And if you want to follow along on our journey, definitely hit that subscribe button. See you guys.